I got a new Twitter follower. I'm so psyched. Marzipan, I'm looking for you later. So yeah, let's address the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the C-suite, because I know that's what you all really want to hear about when it comes to this talk. Yeah, about 2 years ago, or not 2 years ago, about 10 years ago, I spent 2 years living inside of a cult. And when I say cult, I don't mean I got really into Apple products. I don't mean that I got into CrossFit. I mean that I joined an organization, and by the way, they don't have signs out the door that say cult, sign up here. It's a different process. We're going to walk through what that process is and what we can learn from it. But I spent 2 years living inside of an organization that believed they were going to change the world. They had a very, very strong sense of purpose, which we all crave. We also had a lot of sex, yes, and which we all crave, or at least most of us do. And we lived in a warehouse. There were about 40 or 50 of us. It was a giant bedroom. And we changed partners on a fairly regular basis. It functioned very much like a group marriage. Let's just say it was a little weird. Not for San Francisco, obviously, but it was a little weird for the rest of the country and the rest of the world. This kind of ideological intensity mixed with a kind of high demand or high control, that's what I'm talking about when I say the word cult. And being in this group and leaving this group has forced me to ask myself a real difficult and fundamental question. And it's a question which has defined kind of the rest of my life in many ways. And it's changed the way that I approach relationships. It's changed the way that I approach work. It's changed the way that I teach people and that I approach building the organizations that I'm inside of. And when I coach executives on building their organizations, how I coach them. And the question is this: how did I fall for this shit? How did I end up voluntarily giving up vast parts of myself to an organization that I thought was making the world a better place and me a better person? It turned out it was doing neither and actually moving us all in the opposite direction. I don't know if any of you have ever had this experience of something looks really shiny and exciting at first, and then later on it becomes kind of difficult, and then later on, once you're out of it, you're like, what the hell was I thinking? Why was I a part of that relationship, that job, that community, that family, maybe? I don't know. And I think this is a really important question. In order to answer it, we have to go back to the 1950s to a man named Solomon Asch. He was a social scientist, he was a pioneer, and he ran something called the Asch Conformity Studies. In it, he put this unfortunate fellow into an elevator full of his assistants, and when the elevator doors would close, the assistants would all change direction. They'd all face the back of the carriage. And the man would shift uncomfortably for a little bit, and then he would follow suit. He would conform. What Asch showed and demonstrated is that most people, most of the time, will conform to the social norms in front of them, even if that social norm makes no damn sense, like facing the back of the carriage. And he even did other things too. Really disturbing and awkward to watch the videos, but I encourage you to go to YouTube and do that. Anybody who's been in high school knows that conformity is a part of life. We like to think we leave it behind in high school, but the truth is that a lot of who we are, how we show up in the world, is determined by the community that we operate inside of. And this is something that I learned really clearly being inside the cult. What the cult does is they offer something attractive. In my case, I was a 40-year-old divorcing man in the middle of a career crisis, and they gave me a sense of purpose. And they also gave me a lot of attention from attractive women, which is, I don't know, for some reason was very seductive to me. And then you socialize the person subtly at first to group behavior and group norms. It turns out language is incredibly important. We use inside language. We all speak the same way. We all start, it's subtle at first, but then it grows over time. You isolate and reinforce that group behavior, and you get to a point where leaving the group becomes unthinkable. Now, this may seem radical to you, but honestly, leaving a group feels like death to us all, no matter what that group is, and no matter whether leaving it is voluntary or compelled. We as humans need groups. We have always needed groups to survive and to maintain our actual corporeal body. To stay alive, we have needed to be a part of a group. And so for the vast majority of the last, 20, 40, 80,000 years, leaving a group has meant that you would die. And so we're kind of built to not want to leave groups and not want to be forced out. It's one of the reasons online bullying feels so bad. It's one of the reasons shame is so powerful, what Brene was talking about on day one here. And it's one of the reasons that that cults can, and other organizations, right, can kind of acculturate people very quickly and force you to stay, or not even force you to stay, right? You're there voluntarily. The truth is that we are what's called a hypersocial or eusocial species. The biologist E.O. Wilson talks about this a great deal. When we look at this rather disturbing picture, we find it disturbing, even though we are not related to the people in the picture. This is weird for other species on the planet. Almost all other species on the planet reserve their care for people who are direct genetic relatives. We, on the other hand, are hypersocial. We are the most social of all apes. The only other beings on the planet that are hypersocial the way we are bees, termites, and ants, hive insects that kind of gather together. There's also some kind of blind mole rat somewhere as well, but I don't know much about that. So this ability, the cognitive ability we have, mixed with this hypersociality, which is really unique on the planet. Again, like 4 or 5 species on the planet that are hypersocial. We're really weird. This is what E.O. Wilson calls kind of our superpower. It creates this ability to form many, many different kinds of groups, which of course allows us to do incredible things on the planet. In fact, it allows us to we have become a geological force on the planet. We have altered the climate, we have altered the face of the planet. You can see us from space, we are going to space. And this is not because of our big brains necessarily, and it's not certainly not because of our talented or ferocious bodies necessarily. It's really because we have this ability to form together in different groups. This is our species' superpower. This is incredibly important to us. That's all well and good, right? That's all great. I like our species surviving. This is a really good thing. But there's a dark side to it, and this means that we tend to value groups more than we value individuals. When there's a conflict between the group and the individual, the group wins, the individual tends to lose. There's many examples throughout history of organizations that have thrived on this planet. Armies, empires, city-states. They have thrived in the collective, but the people living in that organization have not been doing so well. It also means the really dark side, right? That groups of kind of nice people who are trying to do the right thing by their neighbor and live by the rules that their society is setting up and really just trying to hang on, groups of ordinary people can do really, really bad things in the world. We like to think that maybe there's more psychopaths in Nazi Germany than there are now, but honestly, there probably was about the same distribution. Just the cultural norms kind of showed up in a different way. The other dark side of this, and this is really kind of the part which is disturbing to me, or the part that's been most influential to me. There's a man named Nicholas Christakis who's down at Yale. He runs something called the Human Nature Lab, and this is one of his maps. And what he's mapped is that human characteristics and outcomes can follow along social networks. That was a lot of words, a lot of syllables, but what this means is that if your friend's friend gets divorced, your likelihood of getting divorced increases even if you've never met that person and even if your friend's friend never talks to you about that person or ever gets divorced themselves. Likewise, if they get wealthy, likewise, if they get healthy, likewise, if they get obese, our outcomes, our individual personal outcomes, the way we live our lives, the way we experience our lives is largely determined by the networks and the society inside of which we operate. It's a little mind-blowing, right? Like, your outcome, the people you choose to spend time with is really a life and death decision in some way, right? Like, who I choose to hang out with. So my obsession is good organizations. And my first obsession is really what the heck do we mean when we say good organizations? And we mentioned it in the intro. I really do believe that if we want to build a better world, we have to build better organizations. Our organizations are out of control in many ways. They're filled with great people trying to do great things, but they're creating negative outcomes for the planet and negative outcomes for the individuals in the organization. If anybody read the Amazon expose in the New York Times a few weeks ago, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Good organizations, I think, do 3 things. They build better people. They build people who are generous, kind, optimistic. They take better collective action. They do good things in the world. They do good things to the environment. They do good things with the communities they operate inside of. And they are able to course correct. They're able to, which means learn, right? I tried this, it didn't work. Let me try something else. So we're able to change direction really well. If we're going to build better organizations, it really comes down to just 2 things, I think. or two that I have time for in a 12-minute talk. We need to prioritize community and culture. And what I mean by that is, a few years after I left the cult, when I was still depressed and going through the recovery, I moved to New York City, and I very deliberately began to gather around me people I admired, people who had characteristics and outcomes and created things in their lives that they admired, that I admired. They had work lives, they had relationships, they had frankly, they had money, because I was completely broke. But they had things that I wanted. And it wasn't that I wanted them to give me any of those things, but I wanted to associate with them because I knew that there was, through the subtle alchemy of community, that I would begin to get those things myself. And today, I do counsel C-suite executives at some of the largest corporations in the world on their organizational design. I also have an amazing fiancée who maybe you saw here on stage making you do this a couple days ago. I don't know if you saw that. She's over there. She's wonderful. My life has transformed, and it's transformed because of the community that I have around me. The other thing is, I think inside of our organization is we need to prioritize culture. And what I mean by this is that it's really common inside a business to say, we don't have time for that shit, right? We don't have time. We really would like to do good by the people in our organization, but we don't have time because we have this mission. We have this mission that we're on, and we're going to save the world, or we're going to create incredible value for our customers, and all that's great. But honestly, we live in a pretty abundant time, and I think we live in an abundant enough time with abundant enough organizations that we can begin to pop our head up and say, look, the way we relate to each other at work creates the world that we experience in its entirety. The rest of our life is largely influenced by our jobs and the people we spend time with. So if you're going to take a job, don't ask necessarily, hey, salary's important, but don't ask necessarily just what's the salary, what's the title, what do I get to do each day, what's your sense of purpose, but look around at the people in that organization and say, do I want to be like those people? Do I want to experience a day-to-day life like those people experience? Do I want to be that kind of person? And if the answer is no, then if you have the choice, walk away, run away. And the same is true, I believe, inside of communities, with the friends you choose, or the clubs you join, the church you join, the people that you decide to spend time with. We need to ask ourselves, do I want to be like these people? The other side of this is, I think, as leaders of organizations, is we have to commit to the people, and we have to commit to setting a tone, and we cannot sacrifice our community on the altar of expediency, on the altars of finance, on the altars of we got to get it done now because the analysts are coming. We have to treat it like the way a responsible farmer treats the soil. We prioritize fertility in our soil. We're not going to sacrifice next year's crop for this year's crop. We care about this year's crop, of course, but we're not going to sacrifice. And we need to think of the community and the culture that we create inside of our organizations as something deeply valuable. And I think if we do that, we can make the world a better place, as they say in Silicon Valley, right? But really, we can make our lives better. We can make our communities better, and we can grow the kinds of people, the kinds of communities that change the world and make our lives a better place to be. Thank you all very much.